All right, hello. Welcome to History Chats this afternoon. Um, yeah, we're going to get going with some neighborhood history here in just a couple minutes here, a minute or two. We'll just kind of vamp here for a second until we. Oh, there's an echo. I forgot to mute the thing. Hold on. You probably can't hear this on the microphone or on the people at home, but now, okay, great. Hey, yeah, anyway, welcome. We can get started in just a minute here, but just while we're waiting, and this is set to high, just checking everything. Um, yeah, so we're embarking on a new month of history chats here, talking about some of the neighborhoods of Wausau as part of our kind of wrapping up the year of celebration for the City of Wausau's 150th. Let's learn a little bit about how the city developed. So that's what we're going to do, starting with kind of an interesting topic here in the German neighborhoods. But before we get there, let me just, since we have a minute or so here, if you're not aware, we have the last History Speaks of our of the year. It's coming up next weekend, not this weekend, but on the 12th. And Mike O'Connor is going to be joining us as an artist, an author, and an expert on military history and aviation. And he's going to be telling us, presenting the story of Dick Bong, who during World War II was the highest ace, had the most kills in the air in plane-to-plane combat. And he's from Wisconsin and has a very interesting story. So if you're interested in that, you can check that out. That'll be 2 o'clock on Saturday, November 12th, coming up here. But I think we maybe jump right in here because I think it's about that time. So I'm going to hand it over to Gary, and he'll tell you about the German neighborhood of Wausau.
Thank you, Ben. Good afternoon, everyone. Well, this month we start a little bit of a different tactic with our history chats. We're going to be visiting a variety of neighborhoods in the city of Wausau, like Ben said, turning our attention a little bit to celebrating 150 years of the city of Wausau. So we're going to be traveling around the city of Wausau a little bit, and for this first little adventure, I thought I would present to you what my take on a sort of an unusual neighborhood. I think, Wausau's German neighborhood. As you know, I've spoken in the past with regard to a variety of ethnic communities within the Marathon County. Sort of was developing into a little ethnic community unto itself. So let's travel around and see what we can do. While this one went very quickly. While we're here, this is a bird's eye view of Wausau about 1879, and we're sort of looking at this neighborhood that we're going to be talking about this afternoon. Maybe not too much is recognizable, but what you do see on this bird's eye view is a church, and we'll be talking about that shortly. And also some buildings to your right is the growing brewery industry in the city, and all along what we would be coming to call Grand Avenue. At that time, it was a road between Wausau and Stevens Point. But anyway, so this is where we're going to be talking about. This is a little bit of a glimpse, but first of all, let's just talk about the ethnic population in Wausau in 1885. Since the railroads had started to come into Marathon County, a lot of immigrants started to come in from throughout Europe. Also, a variety of people coming in from the eastern parts of the United States. But from Europe, Germany, Scandinavia, Ireland, France, Great Britain, and Bohemia, currently that Czech area, a little bit east of Germany. So, but in 1885, a third of the foreign-born population of Wausau, Marathon County was German. So this was a very large, had a very large impact on this city at that time. So, so let's take a look. What we want to do is take a look at this specific neighborhood, and this sort of outlines it. You can, on the top of the map, you see Forest Street coming down. This is the 1884, so this is pretty early. The railroads are here on your left, starting from Forest Street going south. Not much here, but what you do see is some things already starting to develop. As I mentioned before, in the lower part down by number 9, we start to see some elements of a brewery coming into Wausau, so we'll talk about that. This is a little bit later, about 1900, 1901. This little neighborhood is starting to develop even further. A larger footprint of the breweries. But before I go much further on Grand Avenue, I just want to make a point about the Grand Avenue Park. This was what came to be called Columbia Park, a variety of other parks, but of course today that is Hammond Park. And a park is a very important part of any kind of a neighborhood, because that's sort of the gathering point for a lot of Sunday afternoons or whatever. So I just want to point out that, as you see on the map, the Grand Avenue Park is what we now know as Hammond Park. But this is the neighborhood. It's starting to come together by 1900. So let's talk about some of this. So we have the breweries. We have the breweries, George Reuter, and then a little bit to the north of that is the Matthey Brewery, and a little bit to the south of that is the concert hall, which is in that park. So this is the beginning of the neighborhood, really, when the breweries start to come. George and the elements that make this sort of a little German community, a German neighborhood, is the beginning of the breweries. George Reuter, born in Munich, born in Germany, learned the craft of beer making, came to us in 1859 and started a small brewery. So just 20 years after George Stevens came up the Wisconsin River to settle Big Bull Falls, here's George Reuter coming into Wausau, starting a brewery on Grand Avenue. And of course, let me back up. Of course, it became more than just that little brewery. It became a very large brewery, employing a lot of people in this neighborhood, a large employer of this neighborhood. One of the pictures here of the George Reuter Brewery, and this is another one that I think this first building might be that Columbia Hall, and then the brewery's going further north. But the hall and the breweries pretty much lined Grand Avenue, a very important part of this neighborhood. And then that same map, let's take a little going north, the Matthey Brewery. So Frank Matthey, born in Germany, came to us in 1858, started his brewery in 1869. So his brewery is a little bit to the north of the Reuter Brewery on Grand Avenue. Again, a little bit of the elements of turning this into a German neighborhood. So in addition to the brewery, the beer, you had the park to the south that provided that place for people to gather for sociability, specifically, most likely on weekends. So let's take another look at the map of what's going on here. So in addition to the breweries to the left of, to the west of Grand Avenue, we see a church. We see St. Mary's Catholic Church. St. Mary's Catholic Church was an one of the earliest churches in the city of Wausau. Really, 1850s itinerant priests coming in from Stevens Point, starting to settle. This is an early picture of their church. Of course, clapboard in the clapboard wood in the early days. But again, St. Mary's serving this neighborhood became very quickly a German Catholic church. The early settlements in Wausau, of course, included Irish and included some French. But by the time the Germans really started to come into Wausau and into this neighborhood, German Catholics centered around St. Mary's Catholic Church here on Grand Avenue. So they would, of course, also eventually build their parochial school on Grand Avenue. This is their school in 1883. Of course, the very commonality amongst Catholics as well as Lutherans in this day is the building of schools closely attached to the church, because they felt a very strong desire to teach their young people their faith and their religion. Eventually, St. Mary's grew a lot. This is their new school and their church on Grand Avenue. Like I say, this has been a constant concrete part of Grand Avenue and this neighborhood for a long time. Of course, today it is part of the Institute of Christ the King, and the school is no longer there, but it's still a very viable church on Grand Avenue, still serving that neighborhood as well as the larger community, of course. Also in that neighborhood was the beginnings of Zion Lutheran Church. This is they had the organizational structure in 1874. This is their first church, little wooden structure, 1876. Again, a German congregation of German Lutherans settling in this part of Wausau, as being a center for the Lutheran congregations. Of course, there were other German congregations at that time. St. Paul's Evangelical and Reformed in downtown Wausau was another German church, but Zion Church had their beginnings in this little neighborhood on Seymour, in that Seymour Street area. This was one of the things in the history of Zion is this: they transferred their school into their church into their first school in 1879, and eventually they would be building a larger church, a larger school in the neighborhood a little bit later. Zion eventually would build a new sanctuary on the corner of 5th and Scott. And then eventually they would build in the 1960s their sanctuary on the corner of 6th and Grant Street. So Zion in a couple of years celebrating 150 years also of Wausau. So again, two strong churches serving the German congregations. So whether you walked into St. Mary's Catholic Church as a youngster, you would be taught in the German language, and if you would be walking into Zion School in the early days, you would be being taught in the German language also. So a heavily German religious element to this neighborhood. So what else do we have in the neighborhood? In addition to the brewery, parks, we also had John Frenzel's foundry, or his ironworks. John was born John Frenzel was born in Germany. Again, another element of the German population settling into this neighborhood. And then he eventually, in 1874, established the Frenzel Iron Works in this neighborhood. This is a picture of the ironworks. Again, for the neighborhoods to work, you needed your churches, you needed your parks, you needed places for people to work like the brewery, but also places to work like Frenzel's Ironworks here in the neighborhood. So in addition to those elements, what I consider part of the German neighborhood situation, I just wanted to point out to some of the people that lived in the neighborhood. So we have Ernest Zimmerman, a mayor of the city of Wausau. This is Mr. Zimmerman, and Mr. Zimmerman lived on Grand Avenue. This building still is on Grand Avenue. A lot of the buildings, of course, in this neighborhood have gone away, but several of them are still here, and we want to point some of the German parts of this neighborhood. So we have also across the street, we have on 216 Grand Avenue, we have the Jacob Coulter residence, still there. He was born in Bavaria in 1839, came to Wausau, eventually would be having the Jacob Coulter Music Hall in downtown Wausau. But again, an element of German settlement here in this neighborhood with Jacob Coulter. Also, Otto Munschau. Otto Munschau came to be a mayor of the city of Wausau. This house is on Kickbush Street, right off of Grand Avenue. But he was the son. Otto Munschau was the son of Karl and Carolina, both being born in Germany. So again, another family coming, a German immigrant family coming in and settling in this neighborhood. Again, on Grand Avenue, we have the John Ringel House. John Ringel, of course, came to prominence in the city, being a mayor. Ringel Brick, quite a luminary in this city. He originally came from Dodge County, but he was the son of German immigrants himself. So again, a German heritage living here in this neighborhood on Grand Avenue. This house is still here, of course, on Grand Avenue. Then the John Lemke House, 626 Kickbush, this little L brick, maybe a Ringel brick, I'm not sure. He was born in Germany in 1843. Again, another German immigrant, another German settler settling in this neighborhood. So with that, I wanted to present a little bit of the German story coming into this neighborhood, south of Forest, sort of north of Lemke, bounded by the river, maybe going over to the railroad tracks. Sort of in a few minutes, just try to present a little bit of the German ethnic heritage that we have in this neighborhood, whether it be the churches serve the neighborhood, the factories serve the neighborhood, the parks serve the neighborhood, schools serve the neighborhood, a variety of other things that sort of made this what I call this German neighborhood this afternoon. So a little bit of a history of this neighborhood, and I'll turn it back to Ben.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was thinking about this as you were going through. I was debating whether we should call this the German neighborhood or a German neighborhood in Wausau. But there's
Well,
yeah,
I think it isn't the German. I think that there are other parts of this. It's not the only, but it's really a concentrated element that we can tell a story of. The churches, the two German churches, and the German people living there, I think make this sort of a neighborhood you can go out throughout the city of Wausau and perhaps some neighborhoods on the west side. But I don't, we can't speak to a Polish neighborhood exactly like we can point to this as a German neighborhood. Of course, the Polish population became very important in the city. St. Michael's Catholic Church up on 6th Street, of course, but the, we have talked in the past about Halder, a little neighborhood of Halder being Irish, a little neighborhood of Bevent being Polish. So this is sort of that little bit of a community unto itself, but it is a German neighborhood in the city of Wausau. Good question.
Yeah, yeah. Well, but I think it also, you could say it is the German, in terms of the institutions, the things that are very the breweries, there's not a lot of other more, German businesses that you could find than two big breweries in the beer garden. And, anyway, interesting way to think. Sometimes, these sort of things, oh yeah, I thought I know this community, but once you go back and, interesting way to look at it. Yeah, cool. Well, so speaking of which, next week, I didn't put the full graphic, but we're gonna keep going south, to look at what may be, depending on what you want to look at this, and I haven't quite landed on whether I'm gonna agree with this or not, but this is my suggestion that the southeast side of Wausau, if you keep going down there, it's kind of like the first suburb of Wausau in a sense. I don't know. It's going to be an interesting thing, but I think it's a very unique, contained neighborhood, with its own interesting history, and we'll look at and kind of work through that tomorrow and or sorry, next week. Not quite ready yet tomorrow, but next Thursday we'll pick up the theme of the neighborhoods, and then to round out the month, we're gonna then go to the west side. Gary's gonna come back in 2 weeks to talk about the near west side, and then I'll kind of keep going from there. So some more Wausau history here coming up, to round out for the month. So hope you all enjoyed that and come back for that. I'm just gonna check to see if there's any other. Excuse me. Yeah. Well, I think maybe we'll call it there then. So thanks everybody for watching. If you made it this far, I appreciate it. Hopefully learned something about the neighborhood here. And if you have any suggestions for other things we should be looking at, talking, other neighborhoods or stories that from Marathon County or Wausau or whatever, always looking for those. So anyway, in the meantime, we'll see you next week.